response video to Great Text, but I think what we'll do is call this a pre-video for a new subject on the Philosopher Roundtable, and maybe I'll use clips from Great Text's video as I respond to it, and but we'll see. Maybe I'll just make a video, as a preliminary video, after this video starting the subject. So this is just to get your mind on the subject, but it's the Drake equation again mostly. And yeah, it's a worthy subject. It keeps coming up, so it should be one of these subjects that we have the argument get over.
Okay, folks, since I'm procrastinating going out and having to get stuff, I'm going to make another video, you know, and you know that's the excuse for not going out and doing stuff.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Don't need this part.
So
I do a little pre-talking.
You know, I'm thinking about antinatalism and how, you know, I've got this whole notion of an antinatalist galactic empire, right? That the purpose of humanity is to spread itself out into the universe in order to destroy all capabilities of life existing everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Well, I have a similar science fiction novel, you know, 1/4 written somewhere around there. But yeah, I use a replicating machine to do it. But the replicating machine actually has a human host on it. And so the human host is woken up from stasis, you know, when there has to be a decision that the computer can't deal with in terms of, you know, whether to, you know, clean a planet or not. So anyway, just to make the thing interesting, and also to make the machines capable of breeding, and then you can have the human interest part, because then the humans get to breed every now and then, and you know, that kind of thing. So you can make it more of a human story. But yeah, it would just be you'd create machines that actually reproduce themselves. You know, they'd land on a planet, collect resources, make all the parts, and rebuild themselves. Yeah, which I think is kind of an interesting concept, because it is theoretically quite possible. You know, it's sort of interesting as an idea, a replicating machine, and how its own evolution would take place, you know, and yeah, on a galactic scale.
Right. And, you know, it's quite an amusing one, because it's like a generational thing, you know, that like they genetically engineer themselves to be able to live for longer periods of time so that they can see their missions fulfilled and stuff. And, you know, seeding colonies on planets all over the universe as base camps to go out and destroy any Earth-like planet.
Yeah, like I said, obviously that wouldn't make much sense, so I don't see that happening. Yeah, it wouldn't be my solution to the problem.
You know, and to expand their, you know, their mission and their scientific knowledge.
Yeah, right. Well, they could just send out smart bombs, really, right? That's the bottom line. You just, you know, the new and improved cruise missile, you know, for whatever, 2,500.
In order to see their dream of all existence being eradicated, being fulfilled. And obviously there's only one hindrance to that fantasy story that's quite amusing to me. You know, in order to prevent life in the universe, we have to seek life all over the universe and stuff.
Well, like I said, that wouldn't be the obligation, so use more imagination. Yeah, use more imagination.
It's amusing, and would make for an interesting story that I can't be bothered writing.
Yeah, well, it's got a huge plot flaw in it, so that's the story, right? I mean, there would be a huge plot flaw in the idea that you'd have to have all this sentient life and all the maintenance to keep it entertained and comfortable. And, yeah, for what purpose? To wipe out microbes that don't feel anyway. So that would be stupid.
But the only hindrance to it, really, is this whole denialism of the antinatalists as to whether there's life elsewhere in the universe.
I don't know if it's anti-natalist in general, but certainly this anti-natalist has made the argument that I think the evidence, just going by the evidence, there's an indication of very rare chemistry, and there's evidence that the universe doesn't really like complexity. It just doesn't like it. It doesn't treat it very well. In most cases, it reduces it. It likes elements. It likes things staying pretty stable.
It's the Drake equation, right? I mean, Mendel said I'm in favour of the Drake equation just purely because I wasn't agreeing with him about it.
Well, yeah, that sort of is the way you announce your forness for something, is when you're against the antis of it. Yeah, that's sort of the only choice. You can't really sit in the middle somewhere. You either think it's credible or you don't think it's credible. It's obvious rubbish as science. It's not even science. It's not even math.
I mean, the Drake equation is something that uses the scientific method.
Well, again, it's not even close to the scientific method in that none of the variables they make up can be repeated unless you have a make-it-up machine. You just make it up. You just pull a number out of your ass and say, there's the number. That's not the scientific method. Pulling a number out of your ass. A critical variable. We'll just pull it out of your ass. Make up any number you want. Throw it in there. No, that's crap. That's not the scientific method.
Or uses methods that scientists have used.
Yeah, it uses methods that smell like science, but really aren't. Yeah, okay, yeah, it smells like blueberry pie, but it really isn't anything close to blueberry pie. It's actually dog shit.
To deduce other things. Now, I'm not saying, therefore, it is as true as those other things, because I'm an adult. I don't have to argue so simplistically. My stance has always been the Drake equation is considerably more scientific than Mendham's psychology.
Well, whatever that means. Yeah, what's the? You're not making an argument. You're just saying crap. I mean, my argument comes from the fact that I had originally fell for it. I mean, I watched Carl Sagan back in the 70s or whenever the fuck it was, and I sort of fell for some of that shit, and then I gave it some thought, and I was saying, wait a minute, that's not right. That they just made that up, and so that's the extent of my psychology on the subject. Was that I became a little cynical about this whole idea of saying, look, we're here, so therefore it must be. And then you realize, well, wait, that's not scientific or logical. Every lottery winner thinks it was really easy to win the lottery. I mean, that's the psychology argument, isn't it? Isn't that the psychology argument? That the winners of a lottery always think it's easy? They have no idea. I could make the lottery 1 in a gazillion and 1 in 1. And the winner wouldn't be able to tell the difference, would he? No, he wouldn't. He'd just say, I won. And it was easy. I bought the ticket and I won. And so that's where the psychology, that's the psychology element, is the idiot like you saying, I'm here, therefore being here must be something things do. When you have no evidence, it's what things do. Things don't win the lottery. Most things lose the lottery. Yeah.
Or what informs and Mendham as to whether or not there is life elsewhere in the universe. Because it seems like...
I mean, there's always little pieces of evidence, but if you just take it to its extreme, you just say, okay, well, universe has been around a long time before we got here in the universe. If intelligence was something that arose in the universe, the intelligence would have a billion-year head start, maybe even more than that on us. And the fact is, it didn't do anything in a billion years. A billion years of high technology, and it didn't do anything. It's not here visiting, saying, hi, how are you? Yeah, we got it all figured out. Here's your happy pills.
It's in Mendham and the Ephesus don't want to consider that there is life elsewhere in the universe because it means that their epistemic duty of eradicating all existence means that they'd have to go out into space and destroy all this.
Well, like I just pointed out, we wouldn't have to do any such thing. Like I said, we could just send out machines to do it. Yeah, no problem.
Other life, but they couldn't just convince people to stop procreating and then push a big red button and destroy planet Earth, that they'd have to go out into the universe, and that's a very inconvenient thing for them to do. It's too difficult to think about, so they just deny that they're...
Well, whatever. It really doesn't have that much to do with the argument, because you could also argue that there's probably no capacity to do any of that stuff anyway. Just a gesture, you could maybe, like I said, make your effort, send your replicating machines out to sit there and do something, communicate with the universe, ask it a couple of questions. If it doesn't answer the questions, you blow it up. No big deal. Again, it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that we can deal with the thing here. So we're still stuck with an argument. You want to say there's cancer all over the universe. No, we're saying there's a tumor here. Now, we know this is a tumor. So, yeah, let's take care of the tumor right here at home. And that's basically our job. And the rest of the universe really isn't something we can control. So there would be no point in attempting surgery out there.
Could be any life elsewhere in the universe, And it's funny because these arguments are invoked like, you can't prove that there's life elsewhere in the universe, or you can't disprove it, so it's like the God argument, it's like the atheistic argument, The burden of proof is on the theist to prove that there's a God. And somehow that's analogous to whether there's life on other planets.
I've never made an argument like that, so I don't know who you're talking to or about. I've never even heard somebody make that argument in arguing that there's no evidence for the existence of life in the universe, as if it was some sort of God argument. You have an expectation that God would show himself. You don't have an expectation that life in the rest of the universe must show itself. So, yeah, I think that's just a straw man. I haven't made that argument. I think the argument can be made just from the raw facts of chemistry and the fact that, right here on Earth, what took place. The fact that there is no evidence, it's one event in all of recorded, known, universal chemistry. One event. That's it. One event.
First of all, it kind of implies that you think that life on our planets will be a higher power than us. But, that aside...
Yeah, well, that's sort of based on the assumption of evolution, taking things to some sort of extreme. But that's the other argument, right, is that evolution doesn't do that. We're the eccentric oddball of evolution. We're here, so we say, yeah, it was easy, but it really wasn't easy. And it really wasn't the common function of evolution. The common function of evolution is to make a great white shark and let it own the game for 300 million years. That's sort of what evolution does. It doesn't really do this, give human beings the capacity to fly to the moon 40,000 years before they can do it. Yeah.
The other thing is, and this is the most fundamental aspect of it, to imagine that we're the only life in the universe is to credit life as being more than just some biological process, some kind of chemical.
Well, I'm afraid it's not, so that's just silly too. I don't know where that implication comes from. I mean, obviously it's a winner of a preposterous lottery, so yeah, very impressive. But there is no prize. It's not a good lottery. There's such a thing as a bad lottery. You could get like triple cancer. It might be really rare to have triple cancer. Like you go to the doctor and you find out you got 3 different kinds of cancer, that all separately occurred in your body. That would be like really unusual. You won. Oh, you didn't really win a good thing, did you? No, you didn't.
Reaction. To imagine that we're special and unique in the universe is to imagine that there is something special and unique about us.
Yeah, well, there is something special and unique about us. I mean, we are the descendants of the only known replicating cell to ever generate in the universe. So right there we're special. Special kind of matter. And then we're the descendant of the only known cell to capture other cells, you know, a eukaryote thing, as part of you know, its function, and create this, you know, slave cells within the cell. So yeah, we're a descendant from that only one-time event. All the other cells never, you know, multi-nucleused, even though they're out there still. There's still cells out there. They don't do that. Only the one cell ever did it. So there you got another one-time event in zillions of permutations, zillions of cellular replications, and only happened once.
Which is completely contrary to the ethicist, you know, cult theory. That, you know,
whatever. It's not a cult theory, and it's not in conflict with the theory at all. How unique we are has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that our function is still idiotic. Replication for the sake of replication, and a 4 billion year long pointless gladiator war to win, to conquer a hill that doesn't need conquering. Yeah, it's idiotic.
we're just shit. That's what we are. We're just shit like everything else. We're just made of the same shit as everything else. And since that shit is all over the universe, then why wouldn't there be shit akin to living things somewhere else in the universe? You know, it don't make no sense, you know?
Well, I mean, what doesn't make sense is to say something like, why wouldn't there be the most rare, uncommon chemistry? We can't even make one. It's so fucking weird. The perfect storm event is so strange and so bizarre that with all our king's horses and all our king's men, we can't Humpty Dumpty again.
To say that we're the only planet in the universe that has life, you know, is just an incredible delusion as saying there is a God. I think.
Okay, so again, so you have absolutely no evidence of affirming that it happened again. You have no evidence that the odds of that first cell weren't a literal Googleplex to the Googleplex power. You have no knowledge of what the odds were of you winning the lottery, and yet you're going to say somebody else must win. It must happen all the time. So you're just making it up. You've decided that you know what the odds are. You know that the odds are in a container this big. That you pulled the jelly bean out of a jar of jelly beans this big. If the jar wasn't infinitely large, no, the jar was this big. And that's why it happens more than once, is because the jar is this big and the number of jelly beans in the universe is this big, and therefore it has to happen more than once. And you're just making it up, and then you're pointing your finger at me and saying I'm delusional when you just made it up. You have no evidence, zero. You have zero evidence regarding permutation and likelihood. You have zero evidence understanding how many lightning strikes in a row it took to create the first replicating cell. What the perfect, how bizarrely bizarre the perfect storm was. Like, what was the odds that anybody ever said in the whole history of mankind, bizarre the perfect storm was? Was that sentence ever said in the whole history of the human race before? Probably not. Does that mean it's going to happen again? Because I said it, it means it's going to happen again? Probably not. See how it works? So to call me delusional when you made that kind of critical scientific error, logic error, makes you sort of petty.
They've got their analogy the wrong way around. You know? People say there's a God because we're so special and so amazing and so complex that there must be a God to create us. You know? And ethicists are saying, we're so special, so amazing, and such an incredibly highly unlikely probability that we could exist or life could have evolved somewhere, that, it only evolved here.
No, what we're pointing out is that all there is evidence of rare chemistry. There's no evidence affirming common chemistry. So all the evidence is on the rare side. We can't say how rare, we're just saying the indication is very rare. Okay, that's where the evidence points to, at least very rare. All right, maybe extraordinarily, preposterously rare, but it's at least very rare. At least, and that's the key word. It's at least very rare. And you're saying it's delusional, okay, not to think that rareness is an inhibitor to commonness. Of course it is.
And that's the true analogy, I think. I think it's more reasonable, because we lack evidence either way.
Well, see, we don't lack evidence either way, so that's just a lie, right? We have evidence. We have evidence of Earth history, even. The fact that it only happened once that we know of. One cell, one time. That's all. The fact that there's a ton of body parts just littering the world now, all over the place, and in all kinds of bizarre locations, in all kinds of high pressure, low pressure, hot, cold locations. There are amino acids, there are the zombie body parts are just laying around, arms and legs, and the pieces of a replicating cell are all over, littering the earth, and yet not one more time has them arranged into a replicator again. Even though there's ammonia environments, sulfur environments, all kinds of different kinds of environments, and it never happened again with all these body parts. That's called evidence of rareness. That's called evidence of not common chemistry. The fact that the human race, with all its technology and innovation and whatnot, can't make one of these things sort of demonstrates that it's not that simple.
More reasonable to assume that there is life in some form somewhere else in the universe. It's not too unreasonable a conclusion to me. Whether that life isn't...
It's not too unreasonable. Well, I'm just saying it would be unreasonable to conclude that there's reason to believe. There's no reason to believe. There just isn't. There's reason to sit and say what the reality is, which is there's no evidence indicating that it's happened again, that it happened more than the one time. And beyond that, all we can do is speculate about how rare the event would be, and we can speculate about how yielding the universe is in general to that kind of complexity, which it is not very yielding to it. It is a hostile place, most of the universe, and this kind of chemistry needs a quiet place, a especially quiet place for it to do any kind of evolving. I mean, it had to evolve. I mean, our logic is evolving now, our intelligence. This conversation is part of a memes evolving. And then our intelligence was evolving. And then our biology was evolving. And as you go further and further down, you get more and more evolution. But theoretically, there was evolution before the first replicator even existed. In that the chemistry, the chemical compounds that made it possible for a replicator to be created had to evolve. That complex chemistry had to have an environment that created it. And we don't even know how complex that environment was. How many of those chemical compounds, say there was 10 compounds necessary, how they even got into existence, and how improbable it might have been that that chemistry even existed. The first RNA.
Even cellular. It doesn't even have the cell structure. Or if it has, through the same kind of random chance developed cell structure, like our ancestors.
Well, I think you got to make a distinction between, replication of a DNA molecule creates the opportunity for accelerated evolution. If you don't have DNA replication, in that you don't replicate, you have to replicate the entire structure. You don't rebuild one based on a blueprint. The way our cells work, in the sense that they rebuild the entire cell, they rebuild the entire organism. The cells just divide. They just split up all the parts and separate and create two where there was just one. But the organisms, now controlled by DNA molecules, don't do that. They grow a new one. They rebuild a new one from scratch, and that's a big difference.
Regardless of what form that life takes, it's incredibly likely that there is life somewhere else in the universe.
Yeah, well, it's incredibly likely there's life somewhere else in the universe, right? And that is a completely obnoxiously contradictory to your own stated cautions before statement. There's no evidence of it, yet you're going to claim it's preposterous now not to believe it. I mean, how can you do that? I mean, really, how can you just claim there's no evidence and yet now you're going to state it as a fact?
Now, that life may be so far away from us that we will never encounter it as a species before our planet explodes.
Well, again, what we would encounter has to be something that, it's just not that simple, right? Again, there's mechanical obstacles to this world you're describing where, matter just replicates and then it evolves by magic. No, it has to evolve a certain kind of way to create complex organisms. You can't just divide in half and split into two organisms and have evolution that way. It's not practically likely that anything could ever evolve. It would take not billions of years, but perhaps zillions of years for something that evolved that way to evolve into something complex. I mean, these are the real obstacles. I mean, to pretend those don't exist and you can just make up whatever the fuck you want and then pretend that you're having sort of a rational, reasonable, logical conversation about reality, it's just a distortion and a perversion and nonsense. That means, you don't really have any credibility.
Or the anti-natalist galactic empire will probably never reach it before it runs out of steam. But I think it's incredibly likely that there is life out there.
I think it's incredibly likely. Like I said, how do you know the likelihood? How do you know a single one of these probability numbers regarding even the creation of the first RNA molecule, the membrane molecules, the molecules that split the DNA in half? How do you know even their lineage? Just to be able to state that even those compounds could be recreated no matter how many permutations you ran the chemistry through. Oh, that's right, you don't have any of those numbers, you're just making them up. Fine. You're here, so therefore being here is what the universe does. Okay. Totally illogical, thank you.
And not as we know it in the sci-fi sense or the imagining sense or the anthropomorphizing all of its sense or turning them into some kind of higher power deity sense.
Okay, so let's just take that kind of eccentrically bizarre sentence you just made, okay, with your little pieces here. So let's just take the last 15 words you just spoke. I would contend they've never been spoken before in the history of all spoken language on Earth. I would contend that they will never be spoken ever again in the universe by anything ever. And it's just an arrangement of 15 words. You can't show me how it's logical to believe that those 15 words exist in the universe somewhere in the exact order and phraseology you just spoke them. And yet you're claiming that a complex molecule capable of being replicated is somehow more likely than those 15 words. To be in the same arrangement as those 15 lousy, stinking, cruddy little words. Yeah. Yeah, so, whatever.
Or some enemy other sense, or some benevolent benefactor sense, or some evil, Ridley Scott alien sense. Is it Ridley Scott? I can't remember. But, just some form of life somewhere in the universe, other than on this planet.
Yeah, some form of life. So what? Some sort of replicating chemistry. Self-replicating. I mean, you're not really giving me much of a definition. So, but yeah, you say it exists, even though we have no evidence of any other, it only happening once on planet Earth. And no evidence of it happening anywhere else, even though there's a ton of bizarre chemistry in our own solar system. Nope.
To me, it's completely farcical to believe that this is the only place in the universe where life exists.
Yeah, so now he's calling it farcical. So you're deluded and you're, what was the other word? You've got a psychology problem, blah, blah, blah. Now it's farcical. I mean, and in this very video, he states that he has no evidence. And yet he's willing to call, with no evidence, to call people farcical. That's pretty farcical, actually. There's a little irony for you. It's rather farcical to call people farcical on no evidence.
Yeah, and that is a belief, right? That is a belief just as much as it is a belief that there is life somewhere else on the planet, because we have no evidence to the contrary.
Well, again, we have evidence. You want to deny the evidence? We understand what probability is. We understand permutations. We understand that there's no affirmative evidence of commonality. There's no evidence indicating the chemistry is easy. And all the evidence points to the fact that the chemistry is hard. And all we're really debating is how hard, how difficult. Again, I'm not emphatically saying there's no life in the universe. What I'm saying emphatically is there's no reason to believe there is.
We're finding more and more Earth-like planets every day.
Yeah, well, I don't think Earth-like planets are going to save you in terms of replicating, creating a duplicate replicating molecule. So yeah, again, you're just talking like the winner. Oh well, it happened here on Earth, so therefore it must happen on every Earth that ever exists. Well, I don't think there's any evidence of that.
That are within the life distance from the sun and so on, from that sun. And I don't hold out much hope for us ever finding that life unless we do actually, genetically engineer ourselves, not for that purpose of finding.
Well, whatever, then it wouldn't be we anymore, would it? It would kind of be thems. Yeah. So, whatever.
Yeah, but just through a matter of, progress, we managed to traverse out into the universe.
They managed to.
Still don't hold out much hope of finding it. Or it being what we want it to be, but still, to imagine.
Yeah, well, it'd be a great white shark in all likelihood. So yeah, we go all the way across the universe to stick our head in a great white shark's mouth and say hello.
And to believe that there can be no life elsewhere in the universe, or there purely isn't any, I think is just a psychological need.
Yeah, well, that's, again, I'll just say that you have fallen for the simplest trap possible. I mean, you're just a silly, like any silly gambling jackass sitting in their chair looking at their little one-armed bandit saying it's going to give any time now. I mean, you're just talking out of complete ignorance. So, ha ha.
Natalist has in order to simplify their quest to destroy all existence.
Yeah, well, whatever. So you want to impugn people's motives and character, fine. You have no evidence of any of that nonsense. And you likewise have no evidence of any reason to believe the rarity of replicating chemistry is a problem surmountable by the universe. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so long. Yeah, well, I'll keep it civil-ish, but yeah, it's just more of the same character assassination kind of crap. And that is not rare behavior, unfortunately. So, bravo. And such. So anyway. Lunatics warbles on a lot. That's funny. He's just such an idiot. Yeah.